What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Epic Gangsta Tales. Got a real interesting story today for you. One of the most feared men to ever walk the streets of Boston, let alone, belong to the PATRIARCA crime family. I mean, just a mean sucker, Today's episode is on none other than Larry BAIONE Zannino. Born Ilario Antonio Zannino in Boston on June 15th, 1920. Larry was an American mobster who was a member of the PATRIARCA crime family of New England. Zannino rose all the way up to consigliere before being locked up ultimately. He also had boss consideration and aspirations, but Junior PATRIARCA won out ultimately to be his father's successor. Zannino grew up in Roxbury, in the South End to be exact, on Shaman Avenue. It was well known that Jerry Angulo, longtime underboss for Raymond PATRIARCA, was a racketeer more than a gangster. You know what I mean? That's a commonly used term. This one's definitely more a gangster than a racketeer or an earner. Well, in this case, Jerry Angulo was a racketeer. He was a major bookie, a money man. You know what I mean? He was holding all the high cards in Boston. But once upon a time, an unmade Jerry Angulo was robbed and extorted by none other than Larry Zannino when he was a young buck. Go figure. He would be his most loyal, trustworthy, and lethal advisor in the years to come. Jerry was so scared and distraught, he made a life-changing move. He approached the man on top of the hill, Federal Hill's own Raymond PATRIARCA, the boss of the PATRIARCA crime family, right? Larry Zannino had this guy sweating bullets. He was fucking seeing him in his sleep, you know what I mean? Jerry had that like an everlasting, gobstopper. He had an everlasting hole in his pocket. Larry Zannino sitting there with a vacuum, like, give me that, just a man's man, But anyways, like I said, Angulo went all the way down to Providence and approached Raymond and ultimately bought his button from Raymond PATRIARCA Sr. for $100,000. And, if that wasn't ridiculous enough, he promised to bring that in annually, So not only did he buy his button for 100 G's, I'm going to bring you that annually, let me, and he did. He not only bought his button, but ultimately, he plugged him in there at underboss, and then he in turn made his brothers under him, the five brothers, the Angulo brothers, and just like that, the North End belonged to the Angulos, and like I said, he was the underboss of the Boston faction. Raymond Sr. was the overlord, and Providence was the boss, you know what I mean? Larry Zannino was the only man from the Mafia to put fear into Whitey Bulger's heart. Bulger highly respected him and wisely feared him, For example, Larry had his family owned a pig farm in Stoughton, Massachusetts, and where it is said James Brazos, who is the older brother of Tosh Brazos of the Barboza crew, they found him buried there. They found a few others that were buried there as well. It was like a little mini mob cemetery. Larry got the nickname BAIONE, which is essentially like, Bayonne, bayonet, right? He got the nickname BAIONE from allegedly stabbing a waiter to death in the South End for a mixture of disrespect and slow service, you know? He was just you know, a wild card, you know? But a highly respected, highly feared member of the patriarchal crime family, no doubt, you know? By 1969, Zannino was identified as a captain in the patriarchal crime family. He was a man's man, and he was respected as much as he was feared. He had the iconic wiretapped quote while speaking to Jerry Angulo. You know, whenever you clip people, Jerry, I always say, get the guys around them first, because everybody's got a fucking friend, Jerry. He could be the dirtiest motherfucker in the world. Someone that likes that guy, that's the guy that sneaks you. You know, and how true that is, you know what I mean? Especially if you see back to, like, you know, the downfall of the Boston mob and all that. You see back to the Irish mob wars. It correlates big time. Big time. You can see that. It's usually, you know, someone big would get killed and their friends would come back and kill that big person, and, you know, just a series of undercuts, you know what I mean? Because at that point, what do they have to lose? You just cut off their main money source or their main protection on the streets, and now they feel vulnerable, which in turn makes people dangerous, you know what I mean? If they're from that element, that criminal element, when you know, what's, you know, an animal with its back against the wall is most dangerous, you know what I mean? You know, anyways, let's get back into it. Larry Zannino was also a mentor to maybe the most dangerous mobster in the patriarchal crime family besides himself. Famed hitman, the Barboza Slayer himself, J.R. Russo of East Boston. You know, who, as mentioned, had the honors of pulling off the patriarchal crime family's most notorious hit on Joseph the Animal Barboza, an ex-patriarchal hitman, and also the first person to ever enter the witness protection program. And J.R. Russo and Larry Zannino tracked him down and whacked him out on February 11th, 1976 in the Sunset District of San Francisco, California. Barboza was booted from the program after murdering a man in the witness protection program. Ultimately, he was, you know, out there in the witness protection program in California, started getting high, met another guy who was like a bikie. They got into it. It was like a love triangle type thing. There was a woman involved. He stabs this guy to death and buries him. The FBI finds out. He gets 5 years in Folsom Prison out there in California, and then, you know, essentially they wiped the slate clean. You know, they kicked him from the program. So he essentially met up with an old friend, or who he thought was a friend, a Greek mobster in San Francisco named James Chalmers of South Boston, who essentially got sick of Barboza's antics and his sleazy ways, and he phoned back home to Angulo, and who in turn dispatched Russo and Zannino to go to the other side of the country to whack him out, and they did. You know, this guy put people in prison for false charges and stuff like that. You know, he got Raymond Sr. Sent to Atlanta for like 6 years, you know, in his later years. You know, they were willing to come to the other side of the country and whack him out. That's how, you know, and, you know, that's what happens with people like that. You know what I mean? Like, you have to have some sense of being smart. If you don't fear anybody, you know what I mean? Like, you know, I think like 50 cents at best, like that's how they'll look at you, like, you know what I mean? Like, that'd be the first motherfucker we knock off, you know what I mean? The tough, you know, they say it all the time. They're caught on tape, you know, all the tough guys are buried. We buried all them, you know what I mean? We do away with them all. That's true, you know what I mean? So you gotta be both, and Larry Zannino was definitely both, you know what I mean? He was the lion and the fox, and, you know, he'd kill you with a spork and a butter knife, you know what I mean, if he had to. He was slick. He was slick like that. He went from, you know, being the nemesis and and ultimately like the Debo of the North End with Angulo and stuff, to being his Luca Brasi, you know what I mean? And he was, and even if it was not real or whatever, he respected Cosa Nostra enough and the title and the rank enough and Raymond enough to do that, and he didn't, you know what I mean? So at the end of the day, you gotta respect that, you know what I mean, from a man standpoint. Let's see. Okay, so it says in 1981, FBI agents via Whitey Bulger found out 2 mafia-controlled apartments in the North End and wired them for sound. They bugged Zannino Social Club on North Margin Street, and as well as Jerry's Place, the Doghouse on Prince Street. Both locations are in the North End section of Boston, which is Boston's Little Italy. And these bugs would do extreme damage to the Boston faction of the Patriarcha crime family, especially the Angulo brothers, Larry Zannino, as well as fellow captain Sammy Granito. The bugs produced 800 hours of recordings. Angulo and Zannino were taped discussing 6 murders with their associates, including the gem itself. It was a drunk Zannino, you know what I mean? Like, you know, this is when the FBI was just went on the offensive around the country. You know what I mean? They had the commission trial cooking in the pot. You know what I mean? Like they were bugging all. This is around the same time that they were bugging all them up, bugging Tony Dux's car, you know, Fat Tony's Social Club, you know, etc., etc. You know what I mean? So they, of course, they had their sights set on the, you know, Raymond Sr., of course, right, sitting high at the top. But of course they wanted the number 2 as well, like who controlled all of Boston, you know what I mean? As far as the criminal element, you know what I mean? Even Bulger had to pay homage and attack him on the sneak with the FBI, you know what I mean? But anyways, yeah, so they were taped, you know, drunkenly discussing 6 murders. You know, including the gem itself, which was, you know, like I said, Zannino was explaining how J.R. Russo of East Boston stepped right out and blew him down. A genius with a carbine, you know. In another recording, Angulo recalled the murder of another underworld figure, Walter Wimpy Bennett, an Irish mob boss from Roxbury, you know, Roxbury section of Boston. And he was an Irish mob boss who Stevie Flemmi and future Don Cadillac Frank Salemi came up under. You know what I mean? So he was their mentor. They came up under him. And Angulo explained how he had Frank Salemi whack him out. You know what I mean? So this was more, you know, really just, you know, they really got these guys by the balls at the end of the day with the recordings and stuff. You know, when the Winter Hill gang, right, like, kind of edging into towards when Bulger took over and stuff like that, when it was kind of on the decline and it more became the Bulger and the Southie show. The Winter Hill gang got between $190,000 and $245,000 in debt to the mafia, to the North End. And, you know, Zannino was so incensed with associates of imprisoned Winter Hill gang leader, Howie Winter, that he actually went to Jerry and asked, why don't we go in that garage right now with machine guns? We'll kill every one of these Irishmen, you know? And, you know, however, Angulo did not agree that such action was merited, you know, and I would have to agree, it was a little extreme, you know what I mean? You know, but, like, essentially that's what I was getting at with that, you know what I mean? Like, Bulger was quoted a bunch of times saying, like, you know, they got a lot of teeth, they can get you from different places and stuff, but really, their teeth up here, really the only one you gotta look out for is Larry. I'm talking about Larry Zannino. like I said, Angulo was like, no, I want my money. You know, of course, like, what, you know, a mobster, especially a racketeer, like him, no. You know, kill him last resort, or if he tells on me or something like that. But no, if I can get my money out of this guy, are you kidding me? No. Hold off. And but like I said, how, you know, the FBI had multiple locations wired for sound, and the evidence was damning. And as a result of a 3-year FBI investigation, Zannino was among 7 men, including Captain Sammy Granito of Revere, and the 5 Angulo brothers were indicted by a grand jury on charges of racketeering, illegal gambling, loan sharking, and murder. On September 20th, 1983, Zannino repeatedly stated he was unfit for trial due to a heart condition. However, the government felt one singular heart attack back in 1977 didn't, you know, it just wasn't suffice. You know, and on July 11th, 1985, he and his co-defendants were slapped with a 30-year prison sentence. You know, tough. Especially when it's, a lot of it's your own words that does you in. But like I said, they get hit with a 30-year sentence. Zannino collapses in the courtroom complaining of chest pains. You know, he was briefly hospitalized before being sent off to federal prison. Unfortunately, Zannino wouldn't see his prison term through, and he would end up passing away on February 27th, 1996, at the age of 76, of natural causes, at the Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. In 2009, Jerry Angulo would taste freedom again, and he would die shortly after. But at least he got to, you know, experience freedom again. I think he maybe was alive for like a year or so, but he actually got out, and like I said, died shortly after. So, you know what I mean? Like, eventually, these guys, no matter how slick you are, how tough you are, how smart you are, you know, the government, they get you when you're a big enough fish or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't take much to get on the radar, especially when you're doing things like these guys. You know what I mean? So, if anything from the story, you know, respect the man. You know, he is a legend, and especially if you grew up on the tales that I heard, and, you know, you're from the area that I'm from, you know who this man is. You know, he is a legend. You know what I mean? And, you know, when I'm asked who I think the toughest, meanest, most deadly member of the Patriarca crime family is, I would have to say it's Larry Zannino. You know, but this has been another episode of Epic Gangsta Tales. Like, comment, share, and most importantly, subscribe, guys. Thank you for rocking with me, you know, and stay tuned. I'll see you guys next week. If I make it till then, you know what I mean? The Patriots, oh my God, what do they, you know what I mean?